For 35 long years Anna lived with a quiet question in her heart, and she never spoke it aloud because her husband Tom never allowed her to step near the old barn behind their small house, and every time she asked why he would smile in a soft way, and say that the barn was not a place she needed to enter, and he would lock it with the same rusty padlock, and turn away as if the matter was closed forever, and since Anna loved him deeply she accepted his word, even when her mind wandered about the mystery sitting only a few steps behind their home, and seasons passed with the same silence, and the same rule, and the barn stood like a silent guard watching their life from the edge of the field. Anna had married Tom when she was young and full of hope, and she trusted everything he said because he always cared for her, and protected her, and worked hard to keep their life peaceful, and though they had no children the two of them built a simple warm life together, and their small house became a place of calm evenings, shared meals, and soft laughter that echoed in the rooms, and Anna tried to push away any thought of the barn because it was the only thing that stood between them like a quiet wall, and she did not want to break the harmony they had. Still there were moments when she watched Tom walk to the barn alone and stay inside for a long time, and she would see the light of a small lamp through the cracks in the wood, and she could hear faint movements, and she would stand by the window trying to guess what he was doing, and her heart would fill with a strange mix of curiosity and worry, but Tom never explained, and she never pushed him because she respected his calm, gentle nature, and believed that when the time was right he would share his secret with her. Years went by and Tom grew older, and his steps slowed, and his hands shook when he held things, and Anna noticed his health fading, but she stayed strong for him, and took care of everything with quiet love, and every night she hoped he would sit beside her, and tell her what he kept hidden in the barn, but he always avoided the topic, and when she tried to bring it up he would change the subject with a soft smile that hid something deep in his eyes, and Anna felt that whatever he was hiding was connected to something painful. One cold night Tom fell sick and never fully recovered, and Anna stayed by his side the whole time, wiping his forehead, holding his weak hands, whispering comfort, but he kept his secret safe even in his last days, and she waited for him to speak, she waited for him to open his heart and tell her why she had been banned from the barn, but the words never came, and his breath grew slower until one morning he passed away, leaving Anna alone with grief, and silence, and the weight of unanswered questions. After his death Anna tried to fill her days with simple tasks and memories, and she kept the house exactly as he left it, and she thought about the barn many times, but she could not bring herself to open it, because it felt wrong to go against his last unspoken wish, and she believed that Tom had a reason, even if she did not understand it, and for years she lived with this quiet respect until 35 full years had gone by and she had grown old, with silver hair and gentle eyes that held more stories than she ever spoke. But on a warm afternoon something inside her changed, and she felt a push from her heart telling her that the time had come, and she walked slowly toward the barn with a set of old keys she had avoided for decades, and her hands trembled because she felt as if she were stepping into a part of Tom's life that had been locked not by force but by emotion, and she reached the wooden door that still stood strong even after all these years, and she placed the key into the padlock and felt the metal shake in her weak hand. Before turning the key she closed her eyes and whispered, "Tom, if there is something you wanted me to know, I am ready now," and with a deep breath she unlocked the padlock, and pushed the heavy door open, and the faint smell of dust and old wood drifted out, and her heart pounded in her chest because she felt a strange warmth inside the dim barn, as if something was waiting for her. Sunlight streamed through the cracks and slowly filled the space, and Anna stepped inside with slow, careful steps, and her eyes adjusted to the shadows, and what she saw made the breath leave her body, because the barn that she had imagined as empty or full of stored tools or forgotten objects was nothing like that, and instead she saw something that made her knees weaken and her heart tremble with a deep, overwhelming emotion. She stood frozen as tears gathered in her eyes, because the truth of what Tom had kept hidden for 35 years was finally before her, and it was nothing she had expected, and everything her heart had longed for without knowing, and she fell to her knees as the weight of the discovery washed over her, and the silence of the barn wrapped around her like a memory coming to life, and she felt Tom's presence in every corner. The secret he hid from her was not something dark, and not something harmful, and not something that would break her heart, but something so powerful that it made her chest ache with a feeling she could not name, and as she knelt there with tears falling on the wooden floor, she understood that Tom had carried this alone, not because he did not trust her, but because he had hoped to protect her from a pain he never learned how to speak about. What Anna saw in that barn was the doorway to the past, the truth of a life she never knew, the echo of choices made out of love and fear, and the beginning of a story she was only now ready to hear, and though her heart trembled, she whispered softly, "Tom, why did you keep this from me for so long?" And the quiet air held her question as she realized this was only the beginning of the mystery she had finally stepped into after 35 long years. Anna stayed on her knees for a long moment as her eyes slowly adjusted to the dim golden light inside the barn, and as she looked around with trembling hands placed on the old wooden floor she felt her breath catch in her chest because the space before her was filled with memories she never knew existed, and the walls were lined with shelves covered in dust, yet each shelf carried something gentle and personal, something that felt like a window into Tom's hidden heart, and she rose slowly using the nearest beam for support as her legs shook with surprise and emotion. On the first shelf she saw small wooden toys carefully carved with patient hands, and each toy was shaped like a tiny horse or a small bird or a little house, and she touched one gently and felt the smooth surface warmed by years of silent waiting, and she wondered why Tom had made these and why he never showed them to her, because she had never seen him carve anything, though she always knew he had a quiet artistic side he rarely expressed. And as she picked up a tiny bird she felt something shift inside her, because this was not just a hobby collection, it felt like something made with intention and deep meaning. She walked deeper into the barn and saw a small rocking chair in the corner covered with a cloth, and beside it lay a soft blanket folded neatly, though old age had changed its color, and the edges were worn, yet it looked loved and well kept, and Anna touched the blanket and felt a deep ache rise in her chest because she began to sense what these things might be connected to, and her heart trembled as she looked at the rocking chair, trying to imagine why Tom would keep such gentle things hidden for decades. As she continued to explore, she found a wooden chest placed under a beam, and the chest was locked, but the key hung beside it on a small nail, as if Tom had left it there for her to find when she was finally ready, and for a moment she hesitated because opening the chest felt like opening her own heart to a truth she might not be prepared to hold, but then she remembered the quiet whisper she spoke at the door, and with slow hands she unlocked the chest and lifted the lid. Inside she found letters tied with a faded ribbon, and each envelope had Tom's handwriting on it, but the name was not hers, and when she saw the name her breath stopped because she recognized it from a story Tom once tried to share, but never finished, a story he buried deep before their marriage, a story about a part of his past that brought pain to his voice and silence to his eyes, and now it lay before her waiting to be heard through the words he never spoke aloud. Anna sat beside the chest and opened the first letter with shaking hands, and Tom's handwriting flowed across the page describing a small child he once loved more than anything, a child lost before Anna ever entered his life, and he wrote about how he had built toys for the little one and crafted a rocking chair and made a blanket that he hoped to wrap the child in, and each line carried a soft ache and a deep grief he never allowed himself to share. She felt tears fall as she read how Tom blamed himself for the loss, and how he believed that speaking about it would make the pain return stronger, and how he feared that bringing those memories into his marriage would place a shadow over the life he wanted to build with Anna, and he wrote that the barn was his place to hold the past and keep the memories safe without letting them break his present, and he wrote that he wished he had the courage to tell Anna everything, but he did not know how to begin. Anna closed her eyes with the letter pressed to her chest, feeling her heart swell with sadness and understanding, because all those years she had wondered if the barn held something dangerous or something meant to keep her away, but instead it held a love story she never knew, a part of Tom that he protected with gentle silence, and she realized he had never banned her out of distrust but out of pain and fear of reopening old wounds, and she wished he had trusted her to share the burden, but she understood why he could not. She placed the letter back into the chest and opened another, and she found drawings inside, small delicate pencil sketches of a little child smiling, holding a toy bird sitting in the rocking chair standing beside Tom with tiny hands raised, and each drawing showed the hope he carried before life changed, and Anna felt her heart crack softly because she never saw this side of him, and yet it was always there behind his quiet smiles and thoughtful moments. In the corner of the barn she noticed a frame leaning against the wall covered with cloth similar to the one on the rocking chair, and she walked slowly toward it, lifting the cloth with careful hands, and beneath it, she found a large painting, unfinished yet beautiful, showing a soft scene of a field with sunlight falling on a small child running toward a tall figure whose face Tom had not yet painted, and Anna understood that this was Tom himself, and the painting was meant to hold the moment he once dreamed of living. She stepped back and looked around the barn, seeing it not as a forbidden place but as a sanctuary for a grief so deep he could not speak it, and she felt love for him rise even stronger because she could feel how much he cared and how much he tried to protect her from a sorrow he believed would weigh too heavily on her heart, and she whispered, "Tom, you should have told me you never had to carry this alone." But something else in the barn caught her attention, a small drawer built into the wall, and she opened it gently, finding a notebook with Tom's handwriting, and the first page began with her name, and she felt a rush of emotion because this was the first thing in the barn meant directly for her, and she opened it slowly. Inside, Tom wrote that if Anna was reading this, it meant she had finally opened the barn, and he hoped she was ready to see the truth of his heart, and he wrote that the past he kept inside the barn was tied to a dream that never came true, and that he was afraid she might misunderstand or feel hurt by his silence, and he wanted her to know that she had brought healing to his life in a way he never expected, and that she was the reason he could breathe again after years of quiet sorrow. Anna felt her eyes blur as she read his words, thanking her for being the light that helped him live without drowning in memories, and he apologized for keeping the barn locked, but he wrote that he wanted to keep the past in one place so that his love for her could stay strong and free from weight, and Anna held the notebook close because it felt like holding Tom's heart. She looked around the barn one more time, seeing the toys, the letters, the drawings, the blanket, the chair, the painting, and she understood that this place was not meant to keep her away, but to give Tom a way to live with his past, and now that she had entered, she felt a strange peace fall over her. She whispered softly, "Tom, I am here, and I understand," and she felt as if the barn itself sighed with relief, as if the truth had waited 35 years to finally be shared. And yet Anna sensed there was still more to discover, because the notebook ended with a final line telling her to look beneath the floorboard under the painting. And with trembling hands she walked toward it, breathing slowly, as the next part of the mystery waited in silence. Anna stood before the unfinished painting with her heart beating in a slow, heavy rhythm, and she looked down at the wooden floorboard Tom mentioned in the notebook, and for a moment she felt unsure if she should continue, because each step she took seemed to open another layer of his hidden life, but something inside her told her that Tom wanted her to see everything now that so many years had passed, and she lowered herself gently and placed her hand on the old floorboard, feeling the texture of the wood that had carried decades of quiet secrets. With careful effort she lifted the board and found a small compartment hidden beneath the floor, and inside it rested a simple metal box covered with age and dust, and the sight of that box filled her with both fear and hope, because it felt like the final piece Tom had kept hidden, and she reached into the space and lifted the box into her lap, and as she held it, she whispered his name softly, almost as if she wanted to ask him one more time if she was ready to open something that carried so much of his heart. The box was locked, but a tiny key lay beside it wrapped in a small cloth, and she removed the cloth gently, and held the key between her trembling fingers before placing it into the lock, and turning it with slow care, and the lock clicked open with a soft sound that echoed in the quiet barn, and she lifted the lid with steady hands, unsure of what she would see. Inside the box she found a collection of items, small and simple yet filled with powerful meaning, and the first thing she noticed was a tiny bracelet made from soft thread and decorated with one small wooden bead shaped like a heart, and she touched it gently, feeling a warm ache rise in her chest, because she understood that this bracelet belonged to the little child Tom had written about, and she could almost imagine a small hand wearing it with joy. Beside the bracelet lay a set of photographs, old and slightly faded, and each photograph captured a moment from a time before she had ever known Tom, and she saw him standing beside a young woman who held a child in her arms, and Anna felt her breath catch as she stared at the image, because the woman had a soft smile, and the child looked full of light and life, and she realized that this was the family Tom had lost before fate changed everything. She traced the edges of the photograph, feeling the emotions rise in waves, because Tom had never shown her any pictures from his past, and now she understood why he kept them hidden, and she could see the love in his eyes as he stood beside the woman and the child, and she felt no jealousy, only deep sadness, because she wished she could have comforted him through his pain, but he had carried it alone for so long. Anna continued through the box and found a folded piece of paper, and when she opened it she saw a hand-drawn map of a small place behind the barn near an old apple tree, and she stared at it with confusion because she did not understand what it meant, and she wondered why Tom would leave a map with such careful detail, and her heart tightened as she realized it must be connected to the memories he kept here. She rose slowly with the map in her hand and walked toward the barn door, feeling the warm sunlight outside pull her forward, and she stepped into the open field with the soft breeze touching her face and the map held close to her chest, and she made her way toward the apple tree that stood tall at the edge of the property, a tree she had passed thousands of times without ever knowing it held meaning. As she reached the tree she noticed something she had never seen before, a small patch of ground that looked slightly raised, as if someone had taken care of it long ago, and she knelt gently and brushed away the thin layer of leaves and saw a small wooden marker buried under the soil, and when she cleared it fully she saw a carefully carved name, the same name she had seen on the letters in the chest, and tears ran down her cheeks because she understood now. Tom had buried something here, perhaps as a way to say goodbye, or to keep a piece of his child close even after life changed, and she sat beside the marker with her hand resting on the ground, feeling a deep connection to the sorrow he never spoke about, and she felt a warmth settle in her heart, because even though she had not known this child she felt a gentle love flow through her, as if Tom had allowed her into a sacred part of his life. After a long moment, Anna stood and walked slowly back to the barn because she sensed there was still more for her to understand, and she returned to the metal box and found one more item inside, a small envelope with her name written in Tom's handwriting, and her hands shook as she opened it because she knew these words were meant only for her. Inside was a letter written with slow, careful strokes, and Tom wrote that he had wanted to tell her everything many times, but each time he tried, the memories of loss returned so strongly that he could not find the right words, and he wrote that the barn was a place where he could hold the past without letting it spill into their life together, and he hoped she would forgive him for keeping it locked because he did not want to bring sadness into her gentle heart. He also wrote that the truth of his child and the woman he had lost shaped him into the man she knew, and he wanted her to understand that his love for Anna was real and not mixed with the past, but he kept the memories in the barn because he feared losing the peace they had built, and he admitted that he wished he had the courage to open this place with her, but time passed and he never found that courage. As she read the letter, Anna felt the weight of his tears in every line, and she felt her chest tighten with both pain and love, because she knew Tom had carried this alone, not out of secrecy, but out of fear of hurting her, and she whispered that she forgave him, and always would, and she wished she could tell him in person, but she hoped he could hear her wherever he was. Anna looked again at the rocking chair, the toys, the blanket, the painting, and she realized something deeper was hidden in the silence of the barn, something beyond grief, something she had not seen yet, and as she walked through the space she noticed a stack of old journals placed neatly beneath the table, and she picked one up and opened it with gentle hands. Inside she found pages filled with Tom's thoughts written over many years, and he wrote about how Anna brought light back into his life, how her laughter softened the weight he carried, and how her kindness reminded him that life still held beauty, and he wrote that even though he never spoke about his past, he felt safe with her in a way he never expected, and he thanked her in his quiet way through every page. Anna pressed the journal to her heart because she finally understood that the barn was not only a place of sorrow but also a place where Tom wrote about healing and hope, and she felt closer to him than ever before, and she knew that this journey into his hidden world was helping her understand the man she loved more deeply than she ever imagined. But when she turned the final pages of the journal, she found a message that made her breath freeze, because Tom wrote about something he planned to leave for her, something important that he hid in the barn before he passed away, something she had not yet discovered, and he asked her to keep searching because the final gift was waiting. Anna stood slowly, her heart trembling, as she realized that the deepest part of the secret still remained, and the barn held one more truth that she had not yet uncovered. And with steady steps she prepared to find it. Anna stood in the center of the barn with the journal pressed against her heart, and a soft trembling in her hands, because she felt that the final truth Tom mentioned would change everything she understood about the man she had loved for so many years, and she walked slowly across the wooden floor, feeling the silence around her grow deeper, as if the barn itself was waiting for her to discover what Tom had left behind, and she looked around with careful eyes, hoping to find something she had missed earlier. The rocking chair stood still in the corner, and the painting leaned against the wall with its soft, unfinished glow, and the toys rested on the shelves like memories carved in wood, and yet Anna sensed that the answer was not in the things she had already examined, but somewhere she had not touched, and she moved toward the far wall where the light fell in a thin beam from a crack above, and she noticed something she had not seen before, a small wooden panel built into the wall, almost hidden behind a stack of old crates. She pushed the crates aside one by one, feeling her breath grow heavier with each movement, and when the panel was clear she saw that it had a small carved symbol at its center shaped like a tiny heart, similar to the bead on the child's bracelet, and Anna felt her chest tighten because she understood that this must be connected to Tom's last message in the journal. With careful fingers she pressed on the panel, and it loosened and opened with a soft sound, revealing a narrow hidden compartment inside the wall, and Anna leaned closer with trembling curiosity, and she saw a wooden box smaller than the one she found under the floorboard and wrapped in a soft cloth that looked newer than the others, as if Tom had placed it there not long before he passed away. Anna lifted the box gently and carried it to the center of the barn where the sunlight fell in a warm circle, and she sat on the floor placing the box in her lap, and her heart beat with a mix of fear and hope because she felt this was the gift Tom wrote about, and she whispered his name softly before opening it, as if asking for his strength. Inside she found a stack of papers, a delicate envelope, and a small velvet pouch, and she touched the papers first, feeling the soft edges worn only a little, and she opened the top sheet with careful hands, and saw Tom's handwriting once again, but this time the tone felt different, lighter, more hopeful, and the words felt as if he had written them with a peaceful heart. He wrote that for many years he lived in silence, carrying memories he did not know how to share, but after meeting Anna his world slowly filled with warmth again, and he learned how to smile and breathe with ease, and even though he never found the courage to speak about his past, he found another way to give life to the love he once lost, and he wrote that the child he had buried in his heart would always be part of him, but life with Anna gave him new purpose. New joy and a new dream. Anna wiped her tears softly as she read, and she turned to the next page where Tom wrote about something he wished they had both discovered together, but time slipped away, and life carried them in different directions, and he knew his health was fading, and he did not want to leave without preparing something for her, something that would bring comfort, and maybe even healing, and he wrote that he had gathered everything in this barn as a way to honor the past, but the final step was meant for her future. She set the papers aside and opened the delicate envelope, and inside she found a letter addressed to her with deep love and careful words, and Tom wrote that the land behind the barn once belonged to his family, and after the loss of his child, he could not bear to look at it, and closed it off from his heart, but he had decided before his passing to sign the property over to Anna fully because he wanted her to have a peaceful place to continue her life even when he was gone, and he wrote that she had given him more happiness than he ever believed he would feel again. Anna felt a deep warmth spread through her chest because Tom had always been thoughtful, but she never imagined he was planning something so gentle and generous, and she whispered thank you as a tear fell onto the letter, and she placed it carefully beside her, feeling its meaning settle like a soft blanket around her heart. Finally she reached for the small velvet pouch and opened it gently, and inside she found a tiny gold pendant shaped like a heart with a carved initial that matched the name of the child Tom once loved, and inside the heart locket she saw two tiny drawings, one of the child and one of herself, drawn with simple lines but filled with deep affection, and Anna closed her eyes because she understood that Tom was telling her something through this pendant. He was joining the past and the present and showing her that both loves existed in his heart and that she was part of his healing. She held the pendant tightly and cried softly, not out of sorrow alone but out of the deep love she now felt for a man who had carried so much pain yet gave her so much kindness, and she realized that even though he had kept secrets he had never kept his love from her, and the barn that once felt like a forbidden place now felt like a sacred room filled with truth, tenderness, and connection. After a long moment Anna stood and walked around the barn in silence, touching the wooden toys, the rocking chair, the painting, the letters, the journals, and she felt a deep calm settle inside her because she understood everything now. She understood why Tom kept the barn locked, why he never found the right words, why he feared bringing sorrow into their life, and why he prepared this space as a quiet home for the memories he could not let go. And she also understood that the barn was no longer a place of pain but a place of love, built piece by a man who struggled to heal, and now she had stepped into it and accepted everything he left behind. Anna gathered the letters, the drawings, the pendant, and the map, and she placed them gently back into the small box before closing it with care, and she stood at the door of the barn looking at the space one last time before letting the sunlight fall across the room, and she whispered a soft farewell to the sorrow hidden here because she knew Tom would want her to live the rest of her days with peace, not grief. She walked back to the house with slow, steady steps, carrying the truth with her, and she felt lighter than she had in years because she now held the full story, not just the pieces, and she felt closer to Tom than ever before, even though he was no longer at her side. That evening she sat on the porch watching the warm sky fade into gentle shades, and she placed the pendant around her neck, feeling its weight like a quiet heartbeat, and she whispered softly, Tom, I forgive you, I love you, and thank you for trusting me in the end. And as the wind moved through the apple tree, she felt as if his memory moved with it, gentle, warm, and finally at peace.